We're still working on the book of 1 Samuel. And one of the things I want you to catch as we start to head into this chapter is several weeks ago, we talked about how when the people of Israel, they went into battle, but they went into battle without God. They left God behind. And the Philistines wiped them out, just took them over. And they're at the end of the battle when it was getting so bad, they decided, hey, we may need to get God in the middle of this. And so they went and they got the Ark of the Covenant and they brought it there and the Philistines captured it. And last week, one of the things that we looked at is how hardened the people's heart there in Philistine, with all the Philistine people, their hearts were so hardened against God. These people, they had a statue that was formed out of a rock. And they worshiped that statue. And when they brought that Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God in the midst of that statue, it says that next morning that when they got up, the statue had fallen down and was bowed down to the Ark of the Covenant, to the presence of God. Now check this out. That didn't get no one's attention. I don't know about you, but I think it would have got mine. But their hearts were so hardened and so far from God. Then it says they set him back up before anyone noticed. And then it said that the next day that he had bowed down and his head had been cut off, and so had his hands. This stone, this rock, still got no one's attention. They started trying to move the presence of God around and bad stuff was happening to them. It still wasn't getting their attention. So they wound up now and they've sent the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel. Now, I want to stop right there, and I want you to be real with me this morning. Please. I beg with you. And this is what I'm asking you to be real. What is the thing that is your God? Is it activities? Is it some people, they just love to be angry. They love to be upset. Your God may be gossip. Your God may be money. Your God may be food. Your God may be sports. I don't know what your God is, but we all have one. And let's just be honest about it. And here's the thing. Have we allowed that God to become such a God in us that we have forsaken our true love, Jesus Christ? And if we're honest about it, we need to say, yes, we have. Let's think back in time. There used to be a time when society structured their schedule around the church, because the church kept its eyes and its focus on priority in Christ. Now, the church has to adjust its schedule around society. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that that's messed up. That is not biblical. And let's just be honest about it. We say, well, that's just the way things are nowadays, and we just got to accept it. We just got to be. No, we don't. Do you realize that if people would stand up and say, no, I'm not participating in this, or I'm not going to allow that to be part of my life on this day that is the Lord's day, the day in which I am called to be in the presence of God in his house, do you realize that those events would have fewer and fewer people there? Amen. And then that society would say, hey, there ain't no sense in having this event because no one's going to show up because they're all at church. And they're going to say, hey, we need to reschedule our event that we don't conflict with the people that are going to church. I ain't talking about the worldly people. I'm talking about God's people. Do you realize that if God's people would start standing up for the truth and quit caving in to all the gods that society offers us, what would our church and our country look like today? It would look totally different. And you say, Wes, well, how would the church look different? Because the church would be your priority. The church would be the thing in which you love and the things you would pour your time and your energy into, instead of the things of society. You say, Wes, what does this have to do with 1 Samuel? Well, it has a lot to do with 1 Samuel. And I want you to turn to chapter 7 of 1 Samuel, and I want you to look at a few verses here. And I want you to, as we look at these verses, I want you to be honest. I want you to think about your own heart, your own life, your own family, and how you serve God. Look, verse 3. Now, what verses 1 and 2 is kind of there in chapters, before I get started, chapter 6 is when they brought the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel, and they're adjusting where it is, and now all the things are happening in these first couple verses, and now all of a sudden Samuel is fixing to speak. And it says, and Samuel said to all the house of Israel. I want you to catch that. He wasn't just talking to the ones that were leaders. He wasn't just talking about the ones that were in authority. He wasn't just talking about the ones that were out there just serving. He was talking to the whole house. It says, all the house. In the next part of this verse, it says, if you return to the Lord with all your heart. Now check that out. He's saying, we must return to the Lord with all our heart. And he continues on, he says, then put away your foreign gods. How do you and I return to God with all our heart? We have to put aside our foreign gods, our things that we give our energy and our strength to, anything other than God. We have to throw those things to the side. He continues on and he says right here, he says, put away your foreign gods and to Astro from among you. Now, this was a god that was dealing with fertility. It was a thing in which they worship. And it says, direct your heart to God. Do you realize that in this verse, there is an activity you and I have to do? It says that you and I are to turn to God. You and I are to get rid of our gods. You and I are to quit worshiping these gods. And it says right here that you and I are to direct our hearts to the Lord. Do you realize that God's not going to make you do this? You have a choice. You can choose to worship the foreign gods, or you can choose to worship God. It continues on here and it says, direct your hearts to the Lord and serve him alone. Alone. Nothing but him. Samuel is telling these people because he knows how they have messed up. He knows how the things have gone. And he says, and he continues on and he says, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. One of the things that's happening here is as Israel has celebrated that the covenant of God has come back, that the presence of God's here, while it was gone, these people's heart had started turning hard to God, and they had started worshiping all these foreign gods. And as they were worshiping all these foreign gods, one of the things else that happened is the Philistines heard Israel getting all excited again. Now back in chapter 3 and 4, this is when the Philistines decided to come in and wipe out Israel. Even at the point there, it said that when they brought the Ark of the Covenant up in the camp there right before they went to battle, it says that Israel, they started shouting and they started praising because the Ark of the Covenant had got there. And the Philistines, it says, they got fearful. And as it says they got fearful, it says, what is going on over there? And some of the leaders there in the Philistines camp says, look, they're a bunch of hypocrites. They ain't truly committed. Get motivated. Get excited. We're fixing to wipe them out. And the Philistines did. And they captured the Ark of the Covenant. But Samuel knows what's about to happen. He knows they're about to have to go back to war. Because he knows the Philistines are there. And he knows the Philistines are going to come in and try to get them. You may be saying, Wes, what does this in the world, any of this got to do with me? Here's the thing. If you are willing this morning to say, I commit every fiber of my being to God, I commit to turn from my foreign gods and turn to God, I commit to direct my heart to God, I commit to give all my energy and focus to God, you want me to tell you what's a-coming? Satan's a-coming. He isn't going to like that, and he is going to throw everything he can at you to derail you. You see, in this situation, to derail Israel, to derail them from the commitment that Samuel was telling them, Philistines were going to come in and derail them. But there's something different about this time than last time. Israel has realized its sins. Israel has realized its mistakes. Have you? Have I? Here's the thing. Knowing is half the battle. Are you willing, am I willing to admit my sins, admit my mistakes, and say, I have learned from my mistakes. Now I'm going to improve upon my mistakes, and I'm going to do right. Check out what happens in the next verse. So the people of Israel put away Baals and Astro, meaning they put away their gods. They were found faithful into hearing the command, the words that Samuel had said to them. It says they put them away. And it says here in the next part of this verse, it says, and they served the Lord alone. You realize that they realized their sin. They realized they had allowed these foreign gods to come into their life. And they said, we're not doing this no more. How many of you here have sin in your life? Every one of us. Every hand in this building should be high. Even some of your feet should be high. And here's the thing. Many times we want to say, God can't forgive me for my mistakes. Or I have messed up so bad, it can't be corrected. I went too far this time. I went too far that I can be used by God. I blah, 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 whatever excuse you want to pull out of the air, just pull it. Here's the thing. That is a lie from the pits of hell. Check out this situation. These people that were God's people, Israel, they're admitting that they have turned from God. It says right there, they have two different foreign gods in their life, Baals and Astro. They have these two different gods. By name, they're admitting to it. You realize that's sin. That's a double sin right there. And ain't no telling what else other sins they have that's not mentioned right there. Here's the thing. They were willing to confess it, and they were willing to change from it. Are you this morning willing to confess it? And are you willing to change from it? It says right here in this verse, they were. And it says, and when they did this, they served the Lord alone. Here's the thing. There's a lot of us here this morning, we can't say we serve the Lord alone. We can say, yeah, I serve the Lord, but then I serve this, I serve this, I serve this, I serve this. There's only one thing that you and I need to be serving, and that's the Lord. Do you realize that when we serve the Lord, the way we treat our spouses, the way we treat our children, the way we treat our friends, the way we act at work, the way we treat our church, all these things fall into place when we put the number one priority in our life, and that's the Lord. Everything else is like an umbrella beneath the Lord. It all falls in place. When you and I get out of step with God, everything else is like a domino. It all gets out of place. My challenge to you this morning is, are you willing to get back in step with God and do something about it? You say, well, Wes, oh, that's great. That's good. All things are rosy there up in this camp. And I want all things rosy and good up in my camp. Remember when I said that Samuel realized the Philistine army is fixing to come? Well, in just a couple of verses, it's happening. And you drop on down there to verse 10. Look at verse 10. It says, here in verse 10, it says, and Samuel, so he realized that all this was happening. He knew that there was coming. And he realized that Israel has repented and they've got their hearts right. And at this time, Samuel has offered up a burnt offering. And the Philistines, it says, they drew near to attack Israel. You see, the obstacle was a-coming. The problem was coming. It was on the horizon. It was about to happen. And then it says, but the Lord thundered with a mighty sound that day against the Philistines and threw them into confusion. Do you realize that in the midst of that obstacle, in the midst of that problem, because they committed and they turned it all over to God, the Lord intervened. They didn't have to do a thing. It says the Lord had this loud thunder, and it threw them into confusion. And Israel was fixing to be found victorious. Why and how? Why? Because they got right with God. How? Because they submitted to God and trust Him to handle it. Last part of this verse. It says it threw them into confusion, and they were defeated before Israel. Do you realize that God is willing and desires and wants to fight your battles? He wants to fight Satan, but he wants you to release it and surrender it to him. And here's the thing. If you're willing to surrender it and give it to God, you're able to sit back just like Israel and watch God wipe Satan out. This morning, I don't know any way to put it any simpler than I just put it this morning. It's 100% biblical right there. You can see it as you would watch a movie happening right here in 1 Samuel. You realize that that's happening today in our lives. But the thing is God's people, just like Israel, has to realize they've allowed sin and foreign gods to come into their life. And the thing is God's people has to desire to do something about it. We have to make the choice no longer. This is no longer going to be a part of my life. It's gone. The only thing that's going to be a part of your life is the Lord alone and nothing else. Let's pray. Father,